in your body and choose to create beautiful magic and love for yourself and for all. Are you ready? All right, let's be still and open our hearts. Feel. Take time to feel. Love. And let your body get used to that vibration. Okay? It's here now for you because you are the now. That's all for now. I love you so much. Blessings.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dove. I don't know, we're not knowing what that was, but
Amazon actually has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every single month. And here's how you can
are
get
you playing something still?
Charlotte Mickelson, and we help everyday people grow their income.
Were you playing that before? You're muted. Anyway, welcome everybody to Thankful Thursday. Good morning, good morning. I'm glad to see you all here. And we are, I believe, live on YouTube. So whoever wants to take over, if Lori's not here, just turning the mic over to you guys.
Oh, can you hear me? I guess you can. Hi, Dove. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Cher. And hi, Lynn. I thought about you last night, Mickey, because I knew Lorri wouldn't be here, and I love when you join and you share. And share, if you want to share, that would be great too. We have a birthday coming up, Cher.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Okay.
Happy birthday, Sharon and Cher.
Yep.
I still can't believe, Sharon, you and I have the same birthday. I just still can't believe that. And I know you're going to be the big 70, and I'll be 66. So we're exactly 4 years. But it's going to be good. I love you, sweetheart. Love all of y'all.
I love you too, sweetie. You know, it's funny. I never listen to myself when I share or teach, because all my life I always found that I didn't like listening to myself. And of course, there's many reasons for that. I mean, we can all say, well, the ego doesn't like you, so of course you don't like listening to yourself. But I have something I just want to express if I confuse anybody, because I found myself very fast talking. And I have been diagnosed with this thing called APD, and it's rather severe. It's audio processing disorder. So my brain and my ears are not aligning. Now, from what doctors had said, they believe that I've had this all my life, because I did have a learning disability as a child and it went into ADHD. But this is a little harder, because when I even go to teach sometimes, substituting, I can't hear the children when they're talking unless I have my hearing aids in. And that's been a gift, except now they're itching inside. So I was thinking when I was listening to myself, well, I'm not really Sharon. This is just a voice, an echo in my mind. And what difference does it make how I sound, right? Because it would only matter to the separate self. And I just about realized what a waste of time it is to keep talking about what I've been through, what I'm doing, and all that other stuff. It'll come out. But it's kind of interesting when you finally say enough chatter. Now, I had something I had sent to Karen this morning that I saw on Facebook, and it's about Christian Murdy had written it. So I'm just going to if it's okay with you, Dub, I'm going to contemplate it a little because I haven't really read it yet, but it looked very interesting. He says, it's quote from the book, The Mystic of Enlightenment, The Irrational Ideas of Man. We are all living in a thought sphere. Your thoughts are not your own. They belong to everybody. There are only thoughts. But you create a counter thought, the thinker, with which you read every thought. Your effort to control life has created a secondary movement of thought within you. This is interesting the way he interprets this, which you call the I. The natural state is not a thoughtless state. That is one of the greatest hoaxes perpetuated for thousands of years on poor, helpless Hindus. You will never be without thought until the body is a corpse, a very dead corpse. Being able to think is necessary to survive. But in this state, thought stops choking you. Now, I don't know, like we have a right mind and we're taught in A Course in Miracles, basically that we have two thought systems. So it's a training to the higher consciousness or the higher ego. But you're still in the illusory state and you are still a part of the dream. So I see exactly what he's saying. And I think it's interesting when he says that we go back in and we get a thought and then we're like, oh, there you go. I just want to grab that business card. That's what Muji said years ago. Or that business card. That's mine. That's mine. And it's not anyone's. But they get formed through the story. And then it becomes our job to unlearn everything that we believe was true. So I love what he said here. Being able to think is necessary to survive, but in this state, thought stops choking you. You know, they brush up against your thoughts and it's like, oh, like that. And we brace with them as if they're real. It falls into natural rhythm. There is no longer a you who reads the thoughts and thinks that they are his. And that is really the gift of A Course in Miracles, because it's not saying you have to, get rid of, you can't stop thoughts. But the problem is the belief in them. And the problem is also the body. Because once this mind identifies with the body, I am in the lower consciousness, I'm in the lower ego. So what do you do with a statement like this? What instrument do you have at your disposal for understanding a meaningless, illogical, irrational statement? And this is what he's saying we will do. You begin to think. Now, what contemplation does is it's not about thinking, it's about what arises. Because the thinking is evaluating. But contemplation is just watching the thoughts rise on the higher mind. And once again, I would reiterate that the higher mind is still illusory. But it's the closest we get to heaven unless you completely disappear, which, I have no idea if that's ever happened. People say it happened to Jesus. I don't know. Because I do think as long as you're in a body, you're going to have to protect it. And that is our survival mechanism. To think that when we have an irrational statement or thought, what you begin to think about it, then we're back in the thinking mind, trying to evaluate it. And, when I was a child, I kind of didn't get what the teacher was saying because of this processing disorder. It seemed to get better as I aged into my teens and high school and college. Now that I'm aging, and into a different period of my life, it 70, I can see that it's also the brain cells or whatever it is are gonna change, or they might not, but for me they are. But I have right-mindedness, and right-mindedness is always silent, quiet whispering. It's never screaming. So when I come from the ego and I feel like I've got to say something that seems right, so I look good, I'm back in the character. I would have done real well in elementary school if I stopped there. I'm just kidding, and not learn anything. Because the thing is, the I don't know is the home card. It's the card that'll take you right where you need to be. Because I'm really not this body. I've had more than enough experiences and also shifts in my consciousness. So I can say, when I see the politics right now out there, I only see a cartoon. These are cartoon characters, and there's going to be a bad guy, and then there's going to be a Superman. And that's really coming in from higher mind. How do I see all this craziness? Well, you see it like you sold everything on the movie screen. There's nothing out there. So I'll get to the lesson in a minute, but he's saying, through thinking, you cannot understand a thing. Now, that's really an interesting thing, because I really believed as an ego that I needed to understand that. It's a problem, whether it be math, whether it be science, I have to understand. And what is the Course in Miracles giving us? No understanding. You are the understanding, because understanding is just this. Understanding is still conceptual, but when we get that we are the understanding, that nothing really happened. It's the space of the holy instant that's here. And what I believed was me is just a passing cloud in my consciousness. But to be quite honest with me, the me or the big me, I wanted it this way until I didn't. And that readiness is coming from the higher mind. So when I say something like, you know, what he's saying is, what are you looking, what you are looking at is not thoughts and things that are his. I have all practical purposes made a statement. What you're looking at is not different from the one that's looking. And that is so common. This particular quote is all over. You know, it's, I guess it's coming from Eastern stuff, but who is saying all this? Who knows all this? Certainly not the person. It's the Holy Spirit, higher mind, Christ consciousness. So he's asking, what do you do with a statement like this? What instrument do you have at your disposal for understanding a meaningless, illogical, irrational statement? You begin to think. And through thinking, you cannot understand a thing. So I'm repeating this because we all know that repetition is how we learn. You are translating what I'm saying in terms of the knowledge you already have, just as you translate everything else, because you want to get something out of it. And that is the whole motive of an ego. What am I going to get? How am I going to look? I want. So looking at the political scene from a month ago to now, it's totally different for me now. I honestly see it as that cartoon. It's just these figures on a screen, and and every movie has a bad guy, and every movie has a good guy. But that's all they are. They're just actors on our stage of consciousness. So it's like, I want to cut the crap out now and just be. I don't have as much ego saying, well, I don't want to just sit here, because it's thinning out. But I do know that I have to be aware of talking slower, because consciousness, I am, can always sound clear. Because what is there to be clear of? There's nothing that we need to do. We don't need to. The lesson of today is something I want to read because I had it out to read. Of course, at this moment, I have to pick it up here and just say that I see nothing as it is now will now be in somewhat of a contemplation. No more trying to understand what this means, because we already know. We already know it means nothing. We already know that our interpretations are everything. Lesson 9 logically follows from lesson 7 and 8. If my thoughts are meaningless because they are preoccupied with a past that does not exist. Now, here's one that I want to just say, a past that does not exist. How many times have I gone back into the story, and it's what Doug Fishman has always said, mentally masturbating the story. All I'm doing is having an empty mind when I'm thinking like that, because I can't, it's like radio, like vibrations that just show up in your consciousness. And the I, the big I that we all are, is all home already, just being and not caring about anything going on in the world of form. Dropping any idea that we could be less than, or I could be like disabled, because that is true in it. Form can be disabled. It is disabled. It's form, it's thought, it's ephemeral. It means nothing. So he's saying something that I totally agree with him, Ken. It is rooted in sin separation, which never happened. Then it must logically follow that I see nothing as it is now, because nothing happened. However, he's saying that this is a tough concept for us. And, you know, I see that as the truth, the fear of love, the very thing that I am. I mean, love can only see itself. It's the mind. It's the seeing that's coming through from the seer. Whatever we're looking for is seeing it all. And the ego says, well, I want to awaken. And the ego says, I want to find a teacher that'll get me home. So on an intellectual level, I believe that I need to do more work, that I need to do this and that. I don't want to get this wrong. And that's a hoax too. You can't get this wrong. He's saying here how terrified we are of what this really means. In the holy instant, which is the meaning of now, there is nothing to see. Chapter 18 in the text says, at no single instance does the body exist. And that's just really hard for a mind, an ego mind, separate self to even understand. How could that mean? I'm solid, I'm sitting, I have a story. I was here yesterday, you know, all of that. And of course, miracles becomes miraculous when you show up into the miracle of every moment. Because the miracle is teaching the mind, it's not what it thought it was. It's not. It's a formless being pretending that it was in a world that meant something. So when Rose used to say, at no single, because he did that a lot, at no single time instant does the body exist. I think Lenny Rose at that moment in time got it, because when he was leaving this realm and transitioning, he didn't appear to be afraid at all. He was so joyful. He was a good friend of mine, and we would talk about it. And I loved his sense of humor. A lot of people had different thoughts, but they're just thoughts. He was the Christ like I am. So what does he have that I don't have? Where do I have to get? I don't want to die. He was okay with it. Nobody knows what happens when this notion comes up. You can't die. And that's the thing that I want to work on into the 70s to the 80s. I can't die because I'm a formless being. And if I fall asleep, So what? Spirit will never let me believe again that I've been here for 70 years or that I'm special. There's no one special. Specialness is division. So anyway, I just want to turn this over to you, Doug, and then whoever wants it, I'd love to hear Mickey and Cher and Lynn, whoever. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sharon. You brought up so much. One of the things that stuck out is when you said it's not our thoughts. First of all, you mentioned those thoughts are not our real thoughts. They are put there by this thought system that's always changing, and our thoughts are always changing. Notice, and the Course in Miracles very quickly says anything that changes is not real. What's real is sameness, oneness, eternal, changeless. What's valuable doesn't begin in time and end in time. What's valuable is changeless. That's the nature of my birthday lesson, lesson 133, which I always recommend to everybody because it gives you a standard to look at anything in this world. If something changes, it has no real value to you, the eternal. If you're valuing something, whether it be things that, you can, usually all things that you can count or is quantitative, you can measure. It's just things that the ego puts there to keep your mind busy. What's real is qualitative. You can't measure peace. You can't measure love. All expressions of love are maximal. Who is there to measure it? So, our thoughts are there to keep us busy. And exactly as you said, Sharon, it's our belief in our thoughts, which you always mention me when you share. He said, as Dove says, that's mental masturbation. Well, mental masturbation is simply belief in your thoughts, thinking that they're real. And every belief has an L-I-E right in the center. It's a lie, but you think it's true. Now, let me kind of bring it back to myself. I went through this a period of, well, it was on Wednesday, actually. There was a few days after I had met this person on the internet who, after about a half hour, said to me, can I borrow $30 from you and I'll pay you back tomorrow? To tell you the truth, if the person didn't say, I'll pay you back tomorrow, I wouldn't even be here talking about it. Most people who say, can you give me $30 or give me $20 or whatever it is, don't say I'll pay you back, which means that they're saying that whatever you give me, I promise to pay you back. So the very next day, this person calls me up and says, listen, terrible thing happened to me. So my mind says, let me hear the story. Said I went to the hospital and the doctors told me that I have tuberculosis, TB. My mind said, really? Well, I wasn't laughing at the time. I said, well, what did the doctor say? He says, I need medicines. I need meds. I have no money. So I heard the story just like a loving person would listen to the story and say, well, all right, what are you going to do? And the person originally told me that they live in Brooklyn Heights. And if you know anything about New York City, Brooklyn Heights is like, it's actually the properties there is even more valuable than Fifth Avenue, Manhattan. It's the old Brooklyn is not there anymore. You have to be wealthy to live in Brooklyn Heights. I said, you must be pretty wealthy. No, it's my parents that own the house. I just live there. I said, okay. I said, did you ask your parents for the money for the meds? they don't love me anymore. So the story goes on and on. Anyway, that's the beginning of the story. Remember, it's a story. It's a story. Keep that in mind. As long as you're caught up in the story, the ego is running your mind. It's that simple. You know, don't make it complicated. If I'm telling a story, which is always from the past, it's never in the now. It's always in the past, and the ego can only live in the past. It can't live in the present. It lives in time. We made it up because time itself is the vast illusion. You got to kind of recognize that you are looking at something that is not real. I mean, he uses the word illusion in A Course in Miracles. Someone can correct me, but I think it's like 900 times. And he uses the word dream about 900 times. That's, you know, between dream and illusion, that's all the world is. It's a dream. We're the dreamer of the dream. The whole course is about waking up from the dream. What keeps us from waking up from the dream is our stories. As long as you have a story, you can't wake up, babes, because you're living in time. You're living in the past. You can't live in time and wake up. If you look at the cross, you know, where we get crucified, time is the horizontal axis, and you can only wake up on the vertical axis, and the vertical axis is now. In the now, you're not connected to the past at all, unless you want to start thinking about the thoughts in your head. Anyway, I just want to continue on that story, but let's be clear. It's a story. Morning glory. And as long as you listen to the story, the ego's gotcha. I gotcha. Okay, so for the next couple of mornings, this person appears out of nowhere on the internet and says, "Good morning, Dove." And I got to tell you, every time she says, "Good morning, Dove," I think of the fact that she promised to pay me back and she hasn't paid me back. That's what I think about. And I really don't look forward to her appearing on my screen saying, "Good morning, Dove," because it's a part of me that doesn't really feel like it's a good morning. It's a part of me that wishes that she would go away. There's a part of me that you know doesn't see her as a good person. Now you might say, "But Dove, you're doing the Course in Miracles. You know, none of that is true." You know, well, actually, you know, I told this story on Wednesday morning. Most of you know I do Maureen's 365 group, and that morning, I think the lesson was 193. All things are lessons God would have me learn, and that was the lesson I wanted to talk about. You know, and to tell you the truth, it took up half the time on Wednesday talking about this, but I really learned a lot, and I want to share what it is that I learned. First of all, I realized that, I mean, I know that obviously this is something, she triggers me, right? It's that simple. She triggers me. And if you know what's on my card, be grateful for your triggers because they reveal your mistaken beliefs. Oh, this, your mistaken lies? That's right. So what is the lie? So we were talking about it, and I really was able to get down underneath it. You you either are stepping back. I think Sharon uses that expression, and I use the expression all the time when I'm counseling. You got to step back because if you're right there looking at it, you're in the ego's arena. You know, the ego owns that stadium that you're playing in. You got to get outside of the movie theater and take a look at the whole picture. When you look at the whole picture, you know, like why is she triggering me? You know, what is it that I did? I gave her $30, you know, as a good guy. You know, I was being Mr. Nice Guy, right? Oh, I'm glad that Mickey's here in the room now, because Mickey was part of my well, I was talking to Mickey about my addictions, and we actually used Rafi's 3 things, like do you do it for approval, do it for control, or you do it for security? Now, I didn't give her $30 for security. I didn't give her the $30 for control. Yes, I gave her the $30 for approval. I wanted her to like me. Now, if you haven't caught the illusion, this is what happened, at least on Wednesday morning at Maureen's. And Maureen was in the room, which she's not always in the room, but we all had a really good look at this story. Whose approval are you looking for, Dove? Her approval? Really? Don't you teach A Course in Miracles where there's nothing outside of you? I'm always speaking to myself. No matter what it is I'm saying, I'm always speaking to myself. And you're telling me you're looking for her? There's no her. You made it all up. And now you don't like it. Now there's no peace. You find you can't love her. You mean you did it to yourself and you can't love yourself, really? The only way you out of this is forgiveness. That was the message in lesson 193. I will forgive and I will see this differently. That's the message of 193. And when you forgive, you're not forgiving her. There's no her to forgive. She's doing me the biggest favor. But by the way, she visited me this morning. I always give her a big hello since Wednesday. Why? There's no accident that she's in my life. There's no accident she asked for $30. And she said, I'll pay you back tomorrow. There's no accidents here. Everything happened perfectly. Perfectly. Yeah. So that I can learn the lesson I came here for. First of all, there's nobody outside of you, period. And when you do things for approval, whose approval are you doing it for? And then a whole bunch of other things started coming in. Yeah, I went back to my childhood. Yeah. I always was worried about what others think about me. Others. There's no others, Dove. But you're worried about what you're concerned what others think about you. Really? You gotta laugh. You mean you use your life worrying about what other people think? There's no others? And you talk about illusions and dreams, but you, in your real life or your so-called real life or your dream life, you worried about what others think? Yeah, since I'm a kid, and I had all the elements of, of childhood. I was the only Jewish kid in a neighborhood, in a school of 600 kids. I was always worried what others think. All right, I peed in bed until I was, I don't know, 12, 14. I went to camp when I was 12, and you could be sure the kids in my bunk really didn't think well of me. You got to laugh, really. If you're not laughing at this point, poor Dove. No, there's no poor Dove. Dove is looking at how he does it to himself. That's the secret of salvation. I'm doing this to myself. There's no other self. You're telling yourself a story that doesn't mean anything. Isn't that lesson number one? And if you're doing the lessons in the last 9 days, say it's the 9th of January, and we're going into the 10th, where my thoughts, I don't understand my thoughts. All of these about, I don't understand my thoughts. They don't mean anything. Lesson 11 says my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. And 12 says a meaningless world engenders fear. And if you are in fear, you cannot possibly know the love that you are. If you want approval, you actually want the approval of somebody loving you and thanking you. There's no one to thank you. There's no one to love you. There's only the love of God, period. God is, and then we cease to speak. It's an isness. Is. That's all there is. You got to laugh. I can go on with this, but I'm going to say just a couple of other things. First of all, I put up in the chat earlier. Some of you didn't see it. Something I saw from Dakini Wild. Some of you may know Dakini. She's from Australia. By the way, I'm doing her workshop on A Course in Miracles. She's giving it 9 o'clock Sunday morning in Brisbane, Australia, and that's 6 o'clock here in New York. I signed up for it. It costs $30. I think it's the first Course in Miracles thing I've ever signed up for in recent times and paid money for it. But I really appreciate what her teaching is. And if you're on Facebook, you see her teaching there every single day. Big. She just writes and writes and writes and writes. So it should be an interesting thing. And it's every Sunday, by the way, or my time, every Saturday night. And I looked at my Saturday night at 6 o'clock on Saturday. I'm not doing anything. So from 6 to 7:30 on Saturday evening, I'll be at Dakini Wilds. The other thing I came across, I can't put it up here because it has these links, but exactly 11 years ago, Sharon Murphy and I did a teaching on awakening together that was on January 9th, 2014. And I just found it because I happened to look on Open Minds. I was looking for Ken Wapnick's commentary on today's lesson, and I didn't find that, but I can't put the thing up, but I can put up the link to the thing. And I think what happened is on that day, Cher was my reader, and I obviously was doing the homily on that day. So it was just nice to know that things are really always very connected. Things are always, and that's the truth. We are all connected, just like that woman who asked for $30. She's my savior. Do you understand that she allowed me to get underneath the whole thing and realize that I really run my life wondering what other people think of me? That came from my childhood, worried about what other people think of me. You got to laugh. There's no others. That's why you got to laugh. What do I think of me? And with that, I'll turn this mic on over to anyone. Mickey, if you want to pick up the mic, please do. Sharon, Miss Cher, Lynn, anyone. I love you all.
I just want to throw in there, Dove, how ironic it is that you paid Dakini Wild $30 to do a workshop, and you paid a stranger $30 to do a workshop. Very, very funny. And
I-
I send you Ken's commentaries on my daily email. So if you look at
Yes.
your email, you'll see that. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mickey, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say what Lynn said, that it's really funny how the two $30 felt completely different to you. That's the interesting part, in that they were both a teaching, but one was coming. Go ahead.
I just want, and there's another $30 that comes from the Bible that supposedly Judas Iscariot took $30 in silver from the people that came to pick Jesus up. I just want to mention that. Go ahead, back to you.
30 something ducats or something like that. But yeah, 30, yeah.
The big 3-0.
Right. And 30 is when we really, is that number is really interesting too, because that's when we're perceived as becoming adults. And that's when we're supposed to grow up. And these days, it used to be like 14 or something, but I just, one thing I have to laugh at also is that when I first called you up about that thing with the money, you pushed back pretty strongly, saying no, money has to circulate. And you told me the story about Regis turning you on to money has, and I believe in that absolutely, that money has to circulate, and in order to get anything you have to give. You know how much I love that
Yeah.
lesson of the Holy Spirit.
I'll just mention one thing.
Go ahead.
I've come to realize that I used to value saving money and holding on to it. And if you listen to lesson 133, which is my birthday lesson, money has no real value to you, the Son of God. But if you hold on to it, if someone asks you for money, say, no, I'm not going to give you the money, because my saying, I want the money for me and not for you, that's the ego. So I have become more loose with giving. Back to you.
Right. I think that, and the thing that I was trying to tell you that day was, you have to be a little more discerning about where you're circulating your money, or you're going to get ripped off, which you've had the experience of, a number of times. But I realized my error in that. Money needs to circulate however it's going to circulate. And my opinions about who should receive it and who doesn't really deserve it are complete. They're fallacies completely. But I still think, and also one thing we didn't talk about that day is, and I thought about later, is that we also have to spend money on ourselves. We get really stingy with ourselves. And you and I are both Tauruses, and we know we like to have our stuff, and we like to save our money, and we like to be cautious about throwing things away. But I also realize that sometimes I deny myself something because I don't think I'm worth it. And that's something that we need to be careful about also, is that we're taking money out of circulation just as much if we're not giving to ourselves as we are if we're not giving to others. And I love it that you're going through this, because it's making me look at my relationship with money also. And I love that we all learn from each other like this, that I've been looking at my relationship with money since you've been bringing this up. And it's very interesting how, we're not healed alone. None of us are healed alone. And all of us, when we go through all this stuff, I wasn't healed alone when Sharon went through her stuff with the election. I'm not healed alone when when you go through stuff or when Lynn goes through or anybody, I'm not being healed alone about my body because Karen's healing her stuff with her physical challenges right now. I'm realizing the interconnectedness of everything so much more profoundly now, and it's because of all the stuff that we talk about. So I'm really, really grateful for all of us. Like Brooklyn loves to say, I love us. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to
Mickey,
jump.
that was beautiful.
I want to jump in and say one thing before you take the mic, Sharon. What I forgot to say, I want to add it now, is all of this reminds me of Ken Wapnick's teaching. He said, if something bothers you, and yeah, obviously at first, this woman bothered me when she showed up in the morning and said, good morning. I said, I don't want to see you in the morning saying good morning because I don't like you. He says, look at your wrong mind, the mind that doesn't love, look at your wrong mind and keep looking at it until you can smile. So you go from your wrong mind to your right mind by not judging the wrong mind. So as long as I was judging her, as somebody who lied to me, of course I lied to myself. As someone who lied to me, I didn't want to see her. But now when she shows up in the morning, I'm very happy to see her. Truly, I'm happy to see her because I'm not using projection makes perception anymore. Guilt over here sees guilt over there. I'm using God's vision, which is extension. I'm an extending spirit. God is my strength. Vision is his gift. Lesson 42. So when you see with vision, whoever you're looking at, you see in the light, not in the dark. Love you. Back over to you, Sharon.
That was beautiful. And so was Mickey's share too. It's we do learn from each other because there's no all thoughts are shared. No, there's no original thought. These thoughts are just rotating. And the way the ego set this up is that it creates our story, and then it's just memories that we're looking at. And when something comes up, oh, I had that happen to me, I'll say to that person, yeah, I can relate. And that's how the ego gets oneness. That it can sit with misery together. And until the readiness really comes through, it's hard to fake this stuff because well, at least I couldn't anyway. The reason I think that most people can't fake it is because you're only talking to yourself. I mean, there's nobody else here. What does that mean? Actually, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing because it's all the infinite self having fun with itself, playing art teacher, playing stockbroker, playing whatever you were in your earthly life. That's all that's going on, and it's happening as false evidence appearing real. Right? It's so important to get false evidence appearing real. So when Ken talks about laughing at it, the memory comes up. We're never informed. Nobody can usurp the power that we are. And the form, I took a lot of, I liked her a lot and I hated her too, because that is what special hate and special love is. But don't I want to just like let it go and just be? And I think that for me, it's just every moment has to be checked in because there's a habit energy that gets in there. The habit energy that's me. I know how you feel. Like yesterday, I taught third grade, and it wasn't like the easiest day. And I think some of it had to do with just the fact that it was, this is just a story, but the weather is so cold out here. And what I've noticed with kids, when it rains or when things, the ego starts with the barometric pressure, even though it's thought, it starts, going into our senses, and we kind of just fall into exhaustion from even the weather. but it is coming from thought and is coming from stories. So the children were very chatty. And and they were only in third grade and third grade. And they would, one girl, no, a girl raised her hand. He told me to drop dead. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I thought about that in third grade, but what I did was I kind of took a step back and realized how damn funny this movie is. It is hysterical when you realize that your character's meaningless. Whatever you do here is for yourself. It's not for your parents. It's not for your spouse. It's not for your children. It's all you. Because, you know, again, there is nothing outside of this mind. This I must ultimately learn. That is the whole course. If nothing is outside of you as the Son of God, then what is the problem? It's addiction. It's addiction. And the ego has thoughts, well, that's not an addict. And that's because the ego is just about the law of opposites. It's not able to do anything that changeless awareness does. Changeless awareness stabilizes our nervous system. It stabilizes our, you know, I want to be a very good Sharon and want everybody to get everything they want. See, there has to be approval in that one. So, you know, when you really look at, you know, the things that that this mind was attracted to, attention, all of that, you know, certainly loving. You know, I do feel as a person, I tend to go to the right mind even before I knew there was a right mind, because my nature's just kind of like, and I could be lying, but this is how I see myself right now. I just don't do drama anymore. And I loved it. I was the drama queen that everybody knew when I lived in Philly. And I was just talking to myself. When I went to court to fight my ex-husband, I was talking to myself. And that is the mystery of not knowing who we are. Because it's meaningless whatever happened to Sharon. It's in like an instant, the Big Bang happened, and I keep reliving the Big Bang. And then you can then look at the energies that come into the consciousness. My consciousness completely changes when I want to tell Cliff what's going on out there. It's a completely different energy. But if I'm inward, of course I know there's no one there. And when I'm inward, the altar is just completely space. There's no heart or lungs. This is all being projected on a screen and believing, oh my God, I have brain surgery tomorrow. Well, brain surgery is not anything except a belief. Now, maybe a week ago, I would have thought that was cold, because the ego will pop up and know what, you know, what triggers will trigger you. Now, is it because the ego doesn't like us? I really don't think the ego cares. I think the ego is a mechanism that the infinite is using to just expose itself into a seeming world. And at the end of the time, you say, I just want to laugh because the whole thing is ridiculous. Because it is, it's a ridiculous movie. You know, I had an idea, you know, that on Sharon still. Now I want to talk about Sharon as if I'm talking about Mickey or Duff. Because to separate myself is not to say I, but it's to say Sharon. And when I say I, I'm talking about the only I that's real. So for today, or from this moment in time, which wolf do I want to feed? The one that will eat my head off, or the one that will lay his head on my lap? And, you know, it just tells the story of how this mind went on a whole trip believing every part of it was real, but finding it actually very funny too, even when I was in the ego. Because the truth of who we are is always there, you know? And when it starts to waken up, Sure, the ego's going to be a little bit more, it's going to keep trying to enter into the mind so it gets its attention. But it's just like the ego is nothing different than a scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. It didn't have a brain. There's no real brain. This is a computer. My mind is a computer. The ego mind, the separate self, and the wrong mind. So what energy do I want for this moment in time? I want the energy that has the eternal, the energy of simplicity, the energy of love. And there is fear that comes through us, but fear is any belief in the ego, because all ego is fear, because it's false evidence appearing real. So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye. And Dove, if you want to say goodbye, here's the mic. And anyway, I love you. And bye, share, and Zoom is on. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're muted, Dove.
You're muted, yeah.
Okay, I just found the title of the homily I did 11 years ago with Cher Murphy. The name of that teaching was called "Life is the Teacher: Empowering Our True Purpose for Being Here," with a subtitle. I always have a subtitle. "Joining instead of competing and comparing opens the mind to magnitude." So I just want to mention that 11 years ago, January 9th of 2014, we were at Awakening together. There was no ACIM gather at that time until Lynn reinvented it in 2016. That was 2 years later. We were all at Awakening together. Just as a memory, thank you so much, Ms. Cher, for being my partner on that, my reader partner on that Sunday morning. And thank you, Mickey, for sharing. Thank you, Sharon. And I see Zoma waiting to